We'll just see how much we can get. All right. Let's go, team.
So our presentation is going to be on counterpublics through the form of a narrative. Enjoy. Once upon a time, in a village far, far away in Indonesia, there lived a tiger named Scar. In tiger school, Scar was never made fun because he did not have the stripes like the other tigers. He was albino, and oftentimes confused with the foreigner, the snow leopard. His childhood was one of many trials and struggles. One afternoon in the jungle gym, while he was playing by himself, a group of bully tigers approached him and said, "What you doing, snow leopard?" Scar replied, "I'm not a snow leopard. I'm a tiger just like you." And the bully tigers said, "You'll never be a tiger like us." And they pawed him off the jungle gym into the dirt. They scarred him forever.
Grandpa, can I read, please? Can I read the story, please? Grandpa, can I please read it?
Yes.
Grandpa, after many years of appalling abuse, Scar had had enough. He decided to look into his past and discover who he is. He wanders to a desolate valley deep in the hills of Indonesia. While walking on a dark path, he sees something light in the distance. He moves closer to the light to discover that it is a strange white pool. I like pools. He ventures even closer and peers into the liquid. But when he looks, he sees not just his reflection, but the reflection of who he once was. He sees the most beautiful and majestic striped tiger he has ever seen. A scene goes through his mind, a tiny striped tiger spiraling deep down into the white. At that moment, he realizes his past and vows to get his vengeance on the rest of the tigers and the tigers to come. That he will bring them to this pool and force them to live the life that he has lived, to walk in his paws.
Can we?
Sure. No, I'm not done reading. I'm not
going to read. Okay. After many years of training and preparing, both mentally and physically, he returned to the village in which was constantly defeated to begin his reign of terror. He convinces some of the other tigers to follow him in the pool of light. When they arrived at the pool, Scar promises them power if they just look into the pool. After seeing nothing but their own reflection, he shoves each of them into the pool. They pop their heads out one by one, each as white as Scar. Seeing that they were no different now, they chose to side with him in their efforts to convert others.
Now it's my turn. Can it be my turn?
Sure, you can read too.
Thanks.
Be loud, okay? I can hear her.
After 7 years of casting tigers into the pool of white, Scar has assembled a massive albino army. He now controls all of the tigers in Indonesia. He sends out a roaring decree to all of the tigers in Indonesia, commanding them to visit the pool of white and become albino. What's albino?
No color.
Okay. One afternoon, while Scar's scout team was on the prowl, they discovered a tiny village where the tigers still had stripes. Wow. They demanded that the tigers leave immediately and head to the pool of white to be cleansed. In the midst of all the roars came an opposition. What's an opposition?
I don't know.
Okay. An unexpected refusal. That's what it is. Okay. A powerful tiger named Terrence growled, "We will not go." There was a dramatic pause. The scout team didn't know what to do, so they quickly returned to Scar to report that what they had seen and heard. Scar demands they retrieve him and force him into the pool of white. But upon their arrival, the entire village is empty. Terrence had led and escaped.
Very good, very good. I'm going to finish the story, okay?
Thank you. They're just so...
Terrence knew he was the chosen one, and he had to stand up against Scar. But when he couldn't face him alone, his army alone, excuse me. So Terrence and his village sought help from another country. They told of Scar's reign of terror and recruited other jungle animals to help them fight against Scar, even as baboons.
The red bugs?
He stayed in the place for years and trained his guerrilla army, as well as the tiger militia. When Terrence knew the time was right, he mobilized his force toward Indonesia to face Scar.
What's the end? What's the end?
You tell me?
Seriously, Grandpa?
Seriously.
You mean they don't say what happened
That's it.
to Terrence or the other tigers?
He could have died. He could have lived, right? So, what do you think the moral of this story is? Where do you think we went with that? Or what were we trying to convey, necessarily? It's a little far-fetched, right? It's a little out there. But,
Does anybody remember what we first said before we started reading the story?
Well, he was the bully. He was bullied, and then he started bullying everybody else
right.
instead of learning.
And as far as Terrence, what was his job, right? As the savior of the tiger people, right? Basically, what we thought was the counterpublics is that and the reason why we left it with an open ending like that is because counterpublics are formed through, and I said in one of my blogs, through oppositions and things like that. They don't always overcome whatever they're fighting against or fighting for necessarily. You don't never, just because you form something like that doesn't mean that you actually accomplish it or whatever. So
And that's why I left it open-ended, because it could be either way. Because in life, that's what happens. Sometimes they're able to overcome, sometimes they're not.
And either way, it's still a counterpublic because it's just something in opposition to. And when we first had the idea of using a narrative to portray a concept that we talked about in class, so we decided to go with counterpublics and to use a story to teach the concept, basically. And I thought about a book that I read when I was a kid, and it's called If Only I Had a Green Nose by Max Lucado. Has anybody read that book? And it tells a story basically of these little people, little creatures, they're called mimics, and everybody gets a green nose. And one person gets a green nose, and then everybody has to have a green nose. And if you don't have a green nose, you are a loser. And then one person gets a yellow nose. And so then they all get their noses sanded and get yellow noses put on. And so basically, the moral of that story is, everybody does what everybody else does just because they're doing it. And there's this one girl who doesn't conform in the story. And so we kind of took the idea or the...
and ran with it.
From that story, and then applied it to counterpublics and how we wanted to teach our story. But we used the parable form of a narrative to teach the concept. And through Leah's going to talk about our research.
Not only did we come up with just this random story, but we also did research behind what counterpublics are. And so we used the book kind of as our main focus of that's what we want to do, and then built off that. But also I found some scholarly sources that talk about what counterpublics are, and so that's how we related the whole idea of this whole thing. So it wasn't just a bunch of random thoughts together. We actually did research.
And we use specific language, you heard opposition, unexpected refusal, these different terms that we put into our story that we found in our research and in our book, in the definitions of counterpublics and in discussions of counterpublics.
In a way, we also use, hopefully, to engage y'all, we used a lot of humor. What we thought apparently
it was funny.
It
It was funny to us when we were writing
so
it.
we had a good time doing it, but we used that as well, and we definitely had a good time using those puns. But definitely the language was definitely very important to get the story going. Kelton.
Does anybody have any questions or anything? Throw some input, Alice, please.
I have one more thing to add. We kind of didn't really even think about it until today when we were practicing before, but we kind of also touched on persona because we each embodied a role and we acted while we were up here in order to make the story more engaging. Instead of just sitting up here and reading a story to y'all, we tried to kind of embody the characters, and that's definitely what we talked about also.
So did you guys get a chance to learn anything that you hadn't already covered in class? Or was it just a
Somewhat, it's more of a review.
Yeah.
I mean, because Dr. Moss is such a good teacher.
Good answer.
Yeah, and really and truly, the book that she read and what we kind of took from there and kind of ran with it, that was kind of a big thing. We kind of based a lot of this, what we were kind of doing.
Yeah,
So.
I ran into the same thing. I was just wondering.
Right.
And it was a deep discussion, and we just kind of had to pull, like, the different scholars that we found, we just kind of had to pull the information that we thought was most important to relay in our story.